Once again, I straightened the for sale sign in the front of our house in New York. Although my wife, Tib, and I lowered the price again and again, 2 years has passed. Without a single bid. To make matters worse, just before the recession hit, we bought an apartment in Massachusetts, intending in our mid-80s to move near our daughter. Maintaining both places and paying taxes in 2 states was shrinking our savings alarmingly, undermining our retirement security. As I went back inside, I remembered an earlier time when a disastrous economy wiped out people's nest eggs. The Great Depression, as it became known, locked the whole country in fear. We'd been here before as a nation. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, during the Depression, and I saw what financial ruin can do to families. I remember going with my best friend, Van Varner, to Pier, scared, poised to run away through the window of an abandoned house where a neighbor had committed suicide after the 1929 crash. I was 7 in 1929, too young to be concerned about anything but the changes in my own life. Mother no longer took me to Mr. Capolo, the barber, where I liked smelling the jars of ointment for gentlemen's hairstyling. Instead, she perched me on a tall kitchen stool and cut my hair with the kitchen shears. Van's mother started cutting his hair too. We looked in the mirror in his front hall to decide whose mother did the worst job. More serious was the disappearance of school lunch money. Usually I walked to Belknap Elementary with 15 cents in my pocket, just enough for a sandwich, fruit, and milk. Now Mother sent my sister and me off with sandwiches in brown paper bags. No way to save a few pennies by skipping the fruit to stop at the candy lady on the way home for forbidden jawbreakers and double bubble gum. I noticed changes in my parents' routines too. Mother no longer threw away scraps of soap, but put them in a little wire box with a long handle, which she swished around in the dishpan to get suds and save the price of a new bar. Dad stopped driving the Chevy down to the seminary where he taught. Instead, he rode the swaying, clanking trolley, which was slower but cheaper. I liked visiting the seminary. I read the quote carved over the entrance on the big gray stone building. "Lo, I am with you always." I liked the way the S was left off of always. God couldn't spell either. There was evidence of the Depression there too. Dad loved his Coca-Cola. His office was so hot in those pre-air conditioning days that the papers on his desk would stick to his arm. His relief was to walk down to Manny's newsstand on the corner, once every morning, once every afternoon, and bring back an ice-cold Coke. One afternoon when I went to Dad's office, I saw a warm, half-finished bottle of Pepsi on his desk. He said, "You get the same amount and save a nickel." Money seemed to be the topic of every adult conversation. One night when my parents had dinner guests from the seminary and I was supposed to be in bed, I crept to the top of the stairs and listened to the conversation down in the living room. Much of it I did not understand, but I followed enough to know that the entire faculty had just taken a salary cut. "Do you think," someone asked, "the whole school will have to close?" As the Depression worsened, 1930, 31, 32, everyone was afraid. Our friends, the Carlsons, had lived in a mansion with white pillars and a sweeping drive. In 1932, Dr. Carlson sold his mansion and moved his family into a little brick house even smaller than ours. Dad's fears went all the way back to his own boyhood, growing up during the great agricultural depression that hit the West in the 1890s. Dad told us about the dust storms, the dying cattle, the stores closing one by one around the courthouse square in Haskell. Dad's father ran the hardware store in town, but hard-pressed farmers no longer purchased new tools. My father and I dug up the backyard. Dad said, my father and I dug up the backyard, Dad said, and planted a garden out under the windmill. Mother raised chickens. We lived on eggs and vegetables from our own garden. "I think it would be a good idea," Dad went on, in his controlled tone I'd come to recognize as his anxiety voice, "for us to start raising at least some of our own food." He didn't add, "in case the whole economy collapses," but at 9 I was old enough to now understand. Our yard was not large enough to grow anything. So Dad raided his last bit of hoarded cash and bought a small plot out in the eastern part of the country, out in the eastern part of the county where land was cheap. There he and I planted a vegetable garden, just as he and his father had done, though we skipped the chickens. As November 1932 approached, all eyes were on the presidential race, which ended in a landslide victory for Franklin Roosevelt over Herbert Hoover. Our family gathered around the Atwater Kent radio on March 4th, 1933, to hear Roosevelt's inaugural address. I remember 10 words spoken in his measured tones that made us all sit a little straighter. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I wasn't around in 1930. I just imagine, with our economy the way it had been and the way it still is, what that moment must have been like. Families from all around the nation, everyone who could get to a radio would get to a radio that day, March 4th, 1933, to listen with the most intent hearts anyone could have, the most open ears and eyes anyone could have for an answer to their fear. And through the radio came a president's voice who ushered some calmness to those fears. And Roosevelt gave them good advice. But that's all he can give. You see, when I become that fearful in life, where I am clinging to anything that will rescue me, what I turn to is, what will my government do for me? It's only partly natural to look to the biggest thing that we can see and glean from it, that what we can to settle our fears. But the downside is this, right? Even presidents cannot relieve fear. They cannot. At best, they can point to the one who can relieve fear himself, the one who can erase all fear. They had a chance to listen to us worship, and we get a chance to listen to them worship, which will be a challenge. I'm a one-minded type of guy. There they are gathered around, and they're hoping to put their hearts at peace, because finances, guys, that will ruin a family if the finances aren't there. Psalm 46 is a psalm about fear. The type of fear that you think someone's lurking outside type of fear? Did you hear that noise? Is someone outside? Is someone going to break? The heart-rattling fear. It's the type of fear why maybe you live in Florida because there's no earthquakes, because you are deathly afraid that the earth might split open on a second notice and you go in. Psalm 46 is about that type. Psalm 46 is about the type of fear when you flip on CNN and you see 21 people lined up, and they don't show you what happens next. 21 individuals who are beheaded because of what you believe. Psalm 46 is about addressing and fixing that kind of fear. If you're in that season of life, Psalm 46 needs to go somewhere that you read all the time. You see, Psalm 46, you can read Psalm 46 from a position of anxiety and still get something out of it. You can read Psalm 46 from a position of anger and still get something out of it. If you approach Psalm 46 from an attitude of frustration and you're looking for help, you will get something out of it. But to get the most out of it, read Psalm 46 when your heart is shaken at its core. The type of fear Adam had hiding in the garden. He just sinned and God is walking through. And he goes, hides in a bush because God Almighty is coming. The type of fear Joseph had in a pit. His brothers just tossed him in and was going to leave him to die. a fear that anguished his soul. That's the type of fear Psalm 46 is talking about. A prolonged introduction. I want to talk about the psychology of fear. What goes on in fear? Why do people fear? I want to talk about this so we can understand where the psalmist goes. Guys, this is incredible stuff in Psalm 46. I want to take the time to till up the ground so we can address, where does fear come from? And to do this, let's talk about, we have our soul care ministry, or maybe a good Christian counselor. If they're trained well, this is what they'll do. You think counselors, we're just going to go there and spend a lot of money and be there forever. This stuff takes time. But a good Christian, I went to counseling for 3 years for anxiety. 3 years for anxiety to have someone help me work through that anxiety and where it was coming from. But then what they'll do, let's say you go to a counselor because of your anger. All right, you go and maybe your wife or your spouse is like, hey, we need to deal with this anger problem. Okay. And so you go in, and a counselor will sit there and just say, hey, well, why you're here? Let's just talk about why you're here. And their goal is just to get you to talk. And once you get through that awkwardness, then you begin to talk about why you're there. And as you loosen up, you begin to say, well, I'm just an angry person. This is, just for an example, say, I'm an angry person. I just don't want to be angry anymore. The counselor may say, well, tell me a little bit more about that anger. What makes you angry? You say, well, now you're feeling a little bit more safe with the counselor. Maybe this is a few weeks down the road. You say, well, look, my wife is spending money we don't have. She's coming home with clothes all the time, and we don't have money. And the counselor gets to see the anger start to build. And the counselor goes, okay, well, just tell me more. Just tell me more. Keep talking. And you say, well, you see, we have a son who's got a medical condition. I make $25,000 a year. My out-of-pocket health insurance plan means $10,000 a year. Goes to the doctor. That's gone. And my wife, and that person's getting angry the whole time, is spending money we don't have. Right? Typical advice would be, well, just get over your anger. But to go deeper, the counselor would probably go, well, let's talk about that. Why does it make you angry that your wife is spending money? Because we don't have money. Well, what's behind that? What's driving that? Well, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to feed my family anymore. You see, the counselor starts picking up. There becomes a theme in this anger. Right? What is the counselor doing? And this is this discipleship process where we're getting beyond the behavior and the surface, and we're going to the heart. And sometimes it takes time. This may be a year in. It just takes time. Well, let's talk about that. Why are you afraid that you won't be able to provide for your family? And maybe the counselor say, well, let's face this fear head on. Put yourself in that situation. Your wife has spent, and I'm not picking on anyone here. This is purely an example, ones I've heard. There's no subliminal messages here. We have a clothing envelope in which she has free reign of. And I've got a projects envelope. Okay, and so we talk about the fear. Well, we look at it, what if I can't feed myself? What if I can't get him the medicine he needs? Right? And then the counselor will begin to address that fear. You see, fear is the power horse which propels, I want to say, probably 90% of all behavior outside of God. But it does not stop there. Right? Most counselors will stop there, okay? This is where we go deeper. What is motivating and moving the fear? What is the fuel of fear? If you don't know God, if you're not a Christian, it's a sense of powerlessness. You cannot control the situation. And the natural reaction is fear. It's fear. You are faced with a situation bigger than you, and it's moving you in a direction that you do not want to go, and you cannot do anything about it. Fear is the natural result of that. If you do know God, and you're a child of God, there's a couple options. What is motivating, what is fueling that fear, which is resulting in an anger issue, there is a disconnect between you and the one with power. Mingled in there could be doubt. Mingled in there could be a lack of trust. There is a disconnect between you and God. And this is Psalm 46 is about repairing that disconnect. It's about bridging that again. And for those of you, if you do not know the Lord, it's about acknowledging that there is someone who is bigger than all. And it's not the government. If you settle with the government, and I'm not tossing anybody or any leader under the bus. I believe they are all sent from God. But if you look to the government for help, and that is your end result, they are born the same way I'm born. Our leaders, somebody's got to change their diapers. And by the way, they're going out the same way they came in. They're not the answer. They are not the ultimate answer. God is. Let's just real quick, one more example. What about anxiety? Right? Maybe another reason you'll go see a counselor, you'll talk to someone. This one's for you, okay? This one is, put this one in your toolkit of how to approach someone who calls you up and say, I am so overwhelmed. Okay? What do you do? Right? There are times where you just shoot straight advice. But there are other times, and this is where the Holy Spirit really kicks in and starts like discerning and guiding you. And you being open, you seeing the path to take. There are other times where you go the next level. They call you up. Hey man, I'm so overwhelmed. Just talk. Right? We're afraid of that because we're afraid they may talk for hours and we don't have time. Right? Well, there's another thing we could talk about, fear. And what's driving that fear? Your wife, your husband, come home and just tell me about it. Talk. And you just let them talk. And you start to hear the theme of, I'm out of control. My schedule's out of control. I won't have time for myself. I don't have time for my family. I'm afraid of running out of time. I'm afraid of being burnt out. Fear. You hear a common theme of fear. What is the fear motivating that? What is the disconnect between God and the source of power that is motivating that fear, which is resulting in a state of anxiety? Addictions. Oftentimes, now there's a different layer to addictions, but they start off from a heart of fear. 90% of the time. Okay, I'll leave that doorway open for whatever. Depression. I mean, you can go through the list, and most of the stuff you tag to fear. And Psalm 46 goes to the heart of fear and kills it. Absolutely destroys it. This is incredible. I mean, the psalmist, we don't know who it is, but the way he structures this psalm is absolutely incredible. They're not just words on pages. This is I turned 33. When did I turn 31? I'm 32. And I don't like roller coaster rides anymore. You invite me to the fair, you're going to get an excuse why I can't be there. I just can't. I don't like the feeling of, it just doesn't excite me, just nothing like fun in that. So I'm the hero who watches the bags. We all know who you are. You want to be the hero, exactly, but in reality, you're just like, I'm afraid of that. We got a go-kart recently, and we drive around the property, and my who's now 3-year-old daughter it goes pretty fast, like 45. And I'm riding on her, and I'm like, just driving it conservatively fast, but we're being safe, and she knows there's more juice to it. And at 2 years old, she's like, Dad, super fast. In her words, she's like, floor it. Dad, what are you doing? And she looks up, Dad, super fast. And I'm like, okay. And I gun it. And like the wind's going so hard, you start to tear up in your eyes. And she looks at me and she's like, it's okay, Dad, I got you. And she puts her hand on my lap. And she just starts to laugh. She loves it. And it actually kind of calms me down. She's bouncing around. She's about to fly out of the seat. She's like, wow, this is super fast. Psalm 46 has moments of slow and super fast. Psalm 46, the more I stayed in this, the more I realized the psalmist is taking us on a roller coaster ride of in fear and out of fear for a purpose. Let me read it one more time through, then let's pick it apart. And feel like it starts off at a speed of peace. And then all of a sudden, you go over and it just picks up your heart rate. If you really dwell in it and bring yourself in it, it triggers fear. And then he pulls you out of that fear and brings you to a place of peace. And then he brings you to an elevated state of heart rate or fear and holds you there to show you how to fix that fear. It's incredible. Watch, just see if you can pick it up. God is our refuge and strength. Just cruising right here, just peaceful. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. All right, just the word fear begins to click, 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 click. Right? I mean, it's not the word. I'll just talk about fear all the time. Click, click. We will not fear, though the earth gives way. Whoosh. Earth gives way. Earthquake. Massive earthquake. Though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam. He's going through every massive natural disaster possible. Though the mountains tremble at its swelling. We got tsunamis, volcanoes, earthquakes. We will not fear. Though, and then he takes you on this, he raises your heart rate. If you really bring yourself in it and you start flashing the minds of the tsunami over in Asia and the volcanoes that are exploding or earthquakes, and you've seen the pictures, the heart rate picks up. And then he slows it down again. There is a river. I mean, is there not any better way to slow a heart rate down than talk about a river whose streams make glad the city of God? You see what he's doing? He started you off, and he's lifted you, and he's taking you to that place of fear, and then he's bringing you back to a moment of peace. Who makes glad the city, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. All right, man, we're cruising now. God will help her when morning dawns. All of a sudden, what's he helping us for? Morning dawns. What's right around the corner? Click, click, just a couple clicks. The nations rage and the kingdoms totter. There we are again. All right, just flash through your mind the wars going on with ISIS and the world and nations raging. All right, he's got your heart rate back up again if you're putting yourself in it. And he leaves it there. Right? Because now he brings God into the picture. He utters his voice and the earth melts. Now you're watching this. And you're watching God react with the nations raging, the kingdoms tottering. You're watching God. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. All right, he brings you back down just a little bit. But he's still holding you here. And what does he say? Come, behold the works of the Lord. All of a sudden, he reveals something to you. That in that moment of fear that you're feeling right now, you can do something. How he has brought desolations on the earth. You see, he's still talking about the fear. He makes war cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. And let's land it. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. And bringing it to this, just saying it. And the God of Jacob is your fortress. You see? Do you see the ride here? I'll break it down a little bit more so we can soak it in. But he's doing this I personally believe with purpose, so that he can trigger. He's using the largest triggers of fear I think anybody can imagine. Wars and natural disasters. He's using these to show you. I mean, there's nothing bigger to fear than that which takes your life and you are completely out of control of. He's using these to show you what is the answer to fear. Lump everything you're going through in this. Because he's hit the top of the climb. I mean, there's nothing greater that can cause fear than what has been mentioned here. Let's go back, and we're going to now work through it verse by verse. We'll go at a pretty decent clip. God is our refuge and strength. God is our refuge and strength. God is your refuge and strength, not anything in all of creation, God and God alone. God is, you may need to say this to yourself 1,000 times in these moments of fear. God is my refuge and strength. God is my refuge. Saying it over and over again. A very present help in trouble. My editor's notes say a very proven help in trouble, which tells me that Hebrew word, there's a little bit of, they weren't really sure on how to translate it, so they put in there another option. They both work. He's a very present help or a proven help in times of trouble. The Hebrew word for trouble literally means female adversary. Female adversary. I was just wondering, did he write this in a moment of like marital, like, oh, I can't take it anymore. You know, like the worst fear ever is my wife. I don't know. It's just interesting. When I looked at that Hebrew word trouble, it's like female adversary. No more subliminal messages. It's just roll with it, Beckham. Therefore, we will not fear. Therefore, we will not fear. It's an active decision to not fear. It's not a result. In Hebrew, I try not to give you a big Hebrew lesson because I don't fully understand it at all. I know enough to be dangerous, but there's several tenses. It's nifil is the tense it comes from, and it means to do something. It's a choice not to fear. Therefore, we will not fear. And we're starting off with the knowledge that God is our refuge and strength. We will not fear. Though, and then he lists these natural disasters. That's the way I see them. The earth gives way. I picture a massive, massive earthquake. The mountains, is there anything stronger in this world that you can imagine than the majesty of a mountain just sitting there? And you're watching it just, till the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea. And when you ever see like a massive landslide move into a sea, it typically creates a tsunami. And though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. Yeah, I think that's an image of a volcano that swells up right before it erupts. I was watching the History Channel or something maybe like 7-8 years ago. They're doing a documentary about this mountain on the Africa coast, Atlantic side of the Africa coast, right across from Florida. And they're showing us the splits in the rocks, and they're showing us that this mountain is literally going to give way one day. And when it does, it will create a tsunami that will wipe out Florida. And my first thought is, I'm moving. And now I work on the beach. Right? Because my first thought was I'm going to move because it triggered fear. And I want to go relieve that fear. Now, maybe it's a smart idea to move out of the way if a tsunami's coming. But my first thought was fear, and how can I control it? There is a river. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. You know, there's a lot of war language in here. And this word, this idea of river, it really, from my understanding, refers to a moat that goes around a castle. I prefer the idea of a river because I picture like a rope swing and like just hanging out on the riverbank. I mean, it's so incredibly peaceful. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of Most High. I mean, God is found in that which is peaceful. That is where God is. God will help her when morning dawns. In other words, hey, we all have got another morning tomorrow, and you all have no idea what that day holds. We have no idea. We don't have to look far to see the reality of that with Ryan at Shepherd's. And God is there, and He is your help even when the morning dawns. The nations rage, and the kingdoms totter. We are watching kingdoms fall apart at the hand of rebels, the hand of terror. And we are watching kingdoms totter on existence right now. We are watching nations rage. This probably, you can relate to this more than a lot of people in the past. Right now. And then God steps into the picture. He utters His voice. The earth melts. The Lord, that Lord, the one who utters His voice and makes the earth melt, is with us. God, the God of Jacob, is our fortress. Living in a fortress. You're living in a fortress. And what he does is he elevates his heart rate so that he shows you what you can do in the midst of fear. Peek open the blinds and behold the works of God. All right? I mean, just pop your head out the window and just watch and begin to change your perspective that God is at hand. You go to Romans 1 and it's clear that God has made himself evident to all people. You flip on the news and either you're going to see like desperation and cries for help and oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Or you're going to see God at work. And I know here's where the debates come in. Well, does God create the hurricane? And does God create the tsunami? And I'll listen to those arguments. I say debates. A lot of times it's just fun debates. And I listen and I just kind of enjoy it. I mean, then it goes to Job and Satan was the one who asked God and then Satan caused that. Bottom line, I know God is in control and everything that takes place in this world does not escape his plan for my life or your life. How you put that all together, who knows the mind of God? Who will counsel God? We don't know. But I do know that. And I can behold the works of God, how he brings desolations upon the earth, right? He connecting this back to the natural disaster. How God brings desolations upon the earth. How he has brought desolations on the earth. You can see these natural disasters, and the tragedy in them is so heartbreaking. And the fear begins to well up. But what do? You recognize God. Somehow, some way, you turn to God and say, you will be exalted. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Aircraft carriers going down and and airplanes being shot. It's hard. This is something I wrestle with at this moment. I've got no answer. God, how do I see you in the middle of war? Children are being slaughtered. Christians are being beheaded. How do I see you in that? I don't know. I wish I had an answer. I don't. But the psalmist is saying, behold the works of God. And so I've got to assume that it's possible. And he gives us a little bit here. He gives us the next step. And thank God that I can move from preacher to pastor now. Because he says, be still and know that I am God. And let me round it out and come back to that phrase. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted. He says, you can't make sense of it all. But know this. I am exalting myself right now. How? Okay, I will rest on the knowledge and the truth that you are exalting yourself. And somehow, in kids dying, you are being... I have a hard time saying it. I really do. I can't put this together. And maybe it's not designed to go together in our finite minds. Maybe these are the very things that drive us to God. And I really am sorry. I wish I could come up here confidently and just slam it, and I cannot. In fact, I didn't even plan on talking about this part. But as I'm saying it, it's just not connecting my mind. I just got to know God is exalted. Somehow he is doing his work, the work he wants to happen. And God forbid, you're going through a season that you cannot explain and you want to question God, why is this happening? When will I go home? How long have I been here? And the answer is I will be exalted. Be still and know that I am God. And he rounds it out, though. The Lord of hosts, the Lord of all lords, he is with you. That is enough to put the next foot ahead, to take the next step. That is enough. How do you get there? This is where I can come back and say confidently, because I've walked it. Be still and know that I am God. Okay, just between me and you, since we're already being a little bit more personal than I planned, are you kidding me? If you had, please, I'm not encouraging this, but if you watched the video of the beheadings, I have not seen it, but I heard someone this week who fired it up. I encourage you not to watch it. And they were days later, as they were telling us, the tears are welling up in their eyes. I don't know if this person knows God or not, but they were so rattled at their core. It was visibly noticeable. And the psalmist, he's just telling us, just be still and know that I am God. I mean, like, come on. Are we missing some steps here? I mean, in the midst of utter anxiety and a storm of my life that I cannot control, you're telling me, take control? Are we missing some steps here? That's where I say I moved from preacher to pastor. Because I've got the honor and the privilege to help guide you in how to be still. And there's a couple ways. I want to invite the band up as I move into this direction. Let's just start with, if you don't know God, I will not assume that everybody in here knows the Lord. I know a lot of you very well, and I have the hope that every one of you knows the Lord. But let's just start there. If you do not know God, a brief moment of stillness to plead out to God help is about all I got for you. You need a miracle to happen in your heart so that you can take fear and turn it into rejoicing. You can take fear and turn it into peace, and that does not happen at the hand of our government. That happens at the hand of God. And that happens when a new birth takes place inside of you. That is the only way to turn fear into rejoicing. And if you don't know God, good luck. But I invite you to come and know God just this morning. Well, you can't slow your heart down enough. So what do you do? I mean, if you do know God and you're caught in this storm of fear, this storm of it's out of control, I can do nothing, what do you do? Well, one option is just cut yourself off. Everything except you and God. Cut it off. Just cut it off. Go into the middle of nowhere. Have nothing feeding your mind except that which you're struggling with and a plea to God for help. How else can you do it? Stop! I just hit the reset button in your mind. You had no choice but to stop thinking about what you were just thinking about because it was so awkwardly, annoyingly awful. That brief moment, you had an opportunity to inject truth. How do you be still? That word be still literally means to cease. You may have to scream at the top of your lungs in the middle of Publix, stop! In order to hit that, because guys, it's so awkward, you can't help but not stop being in that midst of fear of like, is someone looking at me? And you've got a split moment to bring in truth, to know that He is God. Because what happens? The music starts playing again. You will drift back because there's a vacuum in your mind in that 3, 4, 5 second moment that it will naturally be filled with that which you were just at. You may need to do that right now. You may need to do that later on today. You may need to do that in a year. Stop. Just stop and yell it. And yell it. And then know something. Just something. Isaiah 41:10 says this. It says, it says, fear not, for I am with you. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. It's one I memorized because God knows how often I've said that verse to myself. And then just verse 13. For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. Oh, just picture it. He is holding your hand. If you are one that is a habitual fear, not in a negative way, but you just stuck in that, put a card in your pocket so that when you scream stop out loud in your mind and you hit that reset button, you've got a brief moment to fill in some truth. Pull out the card and start reading it as fast as you can. He is God, He is God, He is God. And the more you do it, the more it will settle in your heart and the more you will be at peace and the fear will begin to flee. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. It is I who say to you, fear not. I am the one who helps you. I'm so excited about it because I've seen it. And I know what is going on inside of your heart, that you can be different, that you can stand and not be moved. Even in the video of 21 beheadings, you can rejoice and say, they're with you, God. Praise God, they just expedited the trip. Let me close with this. There you are, Jesus in the garden. He's sweating drops of blood because he knows what lies ahead. And that is his death. And he has a choice to fear or to believe that his Father has a plan. And he chose to believe in the Father's will for his life. And he knew that plan. It was to die for you. And it doesn't matter if you're shaking in your boots in that garden with whatever you're going through, or you're right there with him. His plan was you. His plan was to get to that cross, to save you, to bring you hope, and to one day come again and bring you home to Daddy.